Hello everyone and welcome to Pisa Presents. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different with a look into some modern day cinematic heavyweights with Clever Girl. A peek into how raptors actually were and how that compares with how many know of them today from, say, movies. First of all, when many people say raptor, this is an image or something like it is what comes to mind right away, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Overall, just so that you're aware, there is no one dinosaur that's a raptor. It's actually the name given popularly, thanks to Jurassic Park and its popularity, to a group, Dromaeosauridae, which actually means running lizards. So there's several dinosaurs that qualify as raptors. Just to make things easy and for purposes of identification and what most are familiar with, I'm just going to continue to refer to the group as raptors henceforth. So, really, what defines a raptor? But what defines them is not only their scientific, just the evolution, the phylogeny, what have you, but what defines them is also how they've been perceived in popular culture nowadays, because that goes into fueling a lot of the interest and a lot of the research that is done into finding the scientific end. So let's go into a little bit into dinosaurs in the movies. Now, it's something that has had its ups and its downs. Yes, here's looking at you, people like Roger Corman and all the other folks that just have air quote dinosaurs being iguanas with just like crepe beards and things glued onto them, but we've had some highlights. So, one of my favorite early ones is in 1914. It's called The Primitive Man. That's when people had a lot of the claymation types of things, sort of like Gumby, whatnot, coming around. The first big animated dinosaur was Gertie in 1914, and things really hit a big leap forward in terms of the technology when 1915 came along with one fellow named Willis O'Brien, whom I just actually fist pumped the screen, and there is no point in that, but still, I am an absolute Willis O'Brien fangirl, so the guy's awesome. Now, this particular picture, wow, can you tell I'm really old school when I call them pictures and not movies? But it was called Dinosaur and the Missing Link, a prehistoric tragedy. Now, Willis O'Brien becomes very, very important later for two key reasons building into each other. The first one came in 1925 when he was one of a group of people that adapted a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story called The Lost World, which, you guessed it, dinosaurs. And then later on in 1933, he was instrumental in putting together my all-time favorite movie, King Kong, which I will still insist, just absolute to my dying day, the best fight scene in all of cinema is Kong and the Rex in the first movie. I absolutely love that film. I adore it madly. And really, back at that time, movies like this are how a lot of people began to become aware of dinosaurs. And then later on, it may sound weird, what's actually credited with a lot of not only paleontologists but also culture historians at being even more significant than King Kong is Fantasia, which came out in 1940. So its Rite of Spring segment is just absolutely note perfect, no pun intended, with how the music goes with just the punch of the action. And yes, it does get some flack from people like, okay, yeah, the T-Rex has the wrong amount of fingers, and you have dinosaurs from different time periods, different places, all thrown together. But that's really for dramatic emphasis because you see, of all the people to actually really be in their camp in terms of promoting them in a big dynamic way was Walt Disney. He was looking into things, and when they were storyboarding it, he was against the kind of a very common perception at the time that dinosaurs were the old stereotype was low and slumbering and stupid, and he wanted to make them just really come out on the screen and be just vibrant living organisms. And so that's why he had so many of them together to show just diversity and a lot of this, just this nature that dinosaurs can have back and forth, back into each other, just this fascination that they play into the human mind. And they also did consult several noted people like Roy Chapman Andrews, even Edwin Hubble is in the Hubble Space Telescope. He was, all these guys consulted, and originally the segment was to be even more extended with a look into human evolution, but one of the very few times that Walt Disney was actually talked down from an idea was that one. And because people were just like, this isn't quite the time to be going into this, not yet. So, yeah, they sadly scrapped the human evolution part, but still, for many, many years, that vision of the T Rex just pounding out, going after people, that became and that helped going towards just really getting this visualization of how dinosaurs are pictured in the human consciousness. Okay, not quite that well pictured, but still. And that, of course, got a huge leap forward with Jurassic Park, which is, I mean, the impact that this has had on paleontology, for better or for worse, is something that really cannot be ignored as much as some people try to. And while, yes, the movies have their faults and everything, what really doesn't? But still, there are so many people in the science right now that are in it because of Jurassic Park. And this right here is actually a still from Hawaii. It's the Hawaiian island of, I believe it's Kauai. But my husband and I went there on our honeymoon. And so because they filmed a lot of the first Jurassic Park in the Hawaiian Islands, they still have some of the sets and everything over there, like things that people can visit. And that branch in back of the sign is where in the first one, Grant and the kids hide underneath. Hello, no, sorry. I have a rabbit named Grant, and whenever I say his name, or like I was watching the first movie the other day in preparation for this, he kept sticking his ears up, like who is talking about me all the time? But yeah, so that was where Grant and the kids were hiding underneath, looking at the Gallimimus, or Gallimimuses, as Tim put it. Now, the one of the main dinosaurs in Jurassic Park was Velociraptor. That's the full name of the species that they really used. Now, using Raptor in the movie was something that was a carryover from the original book, which was written by Michael Crichton. Now, he wanted to have a character kind of like an anti-hero character, almost like, this is going to sound to be like a weird comparison maybe, but almost like Venom in the Marvel Comics and then the subsequent movies, where you had a character that, yes, it could serve as a bad guy, but still, all the same, it's almost like at times you didn't quite know what quote-unquote side they were on. And so he wanted somebody other than the T-Rex, because after Fantasia and after King Kong, movies like that, the Rex has just become the seminal, just absolute, just big bad boss fight of all the dinosaurs. So he wanted somebody else. So he added in the Raptors. There's one big issue with that, as we'll see later. So what defines a raptor, first of all? And really, how physically, like in terms of just the yoga dynamics, does Velociraptor get its claw up there? Because that's, I mean, man, I wish I was that flexible. So first of all, raptors have their heyday during the Cretaceous period. But the thing is that we know that they evolved much, much earlier, because a lot of teeth with raptor-like features, like this particular one right here is a Utah raptor. It's one of my favorite ones. These teeth were around upwards of, even compared to the early raptors in the Cretaceous, like 100 million years earlier, which means that obviously raptors had to have evolved earlier, sometime in the early Jurassic. People are kind of guesstimating right now. Overall, you're looking at small to medium-sized bipedal carnivorous dinosaurs. So yes, the velociraptors in Jurassic Park, that's not really what they look like. Sorry, folks, I'm going to be crushing a lot of dreams here in the next couple minutes, so that's kind of how it is. Now, they have three-fingered hands with a curved claw on the hind feet, and they have larger brain cases than most dinosaurs. That there's a throwaway line in the first movie where Grant starts talking to Muldoon, and then Muldoon kind of cuts him off about because their brain, and then, when they're sort of freaking out at first that they have raptors in the park, that does not mean that they're intelligent enough, so to speak, to go on and, start opening up doors and things. Really what that lends to is that there were not only just terrestrial raptors, but also ones that were arboreal. So in other words, ones that lived in trees. And you had them in all sorts of different environments and things. But one thing that they had in common was that these were agile creatures. They were very agile, very fast, and just their reflexes had to be absolute lightning quick. And having a brain case the size that they did was a reflection of having a brain that was capable of the sort of neural connections needed to kind of have these abilities. It didn't mean that they were of, like, say, they would hatch out of an egg and start quoting Macbeth. It's not a measure of that, because the brain cases were still relatively small compared to a lot of early mammals. These here are the aforementioned three-fingered hands. This is interesting. So, Deinonychus, that's one of the raptors. They become very important very soon, I promise. Their forelimb is on the left. Archaeopteryx is on the right. Deinonychus is one of the major dinosaurs that's being studied in terms of determining the relationship between birds and dinosaurs. And also, when Deinonychus really started to get studied heavily, sometime about like 1960, late 50s, early 60s, most notably with very heavy like museum work and modeling with Deinonychus at the time, people were looking at the skeleton and it's almost like, gee, that's pretty bird-like. Deinonychus is one of the key dinosaurs for determining and studying this interrelationship between dinosaurs and birds. And you can see there, although Archaeopteryx is not really classified as a bird anymore according to paleontologists, it's more lizard-like than it is bird-like. Still, those look relatively pretty gosh darn close. Now, that right there is the hind foot of specifically Deinonychus, although obviously that is a common feature with raptors. Now, it's called colloquially the killing claw, but is that true? Nope, sorry folks, it isn't. Now, if you look at the bones beneath that claw, they're not exactly robust. A lot of raptors have bones that are very what's called gracile, which is thinner, even on that particular claw. And also, too, the point of the claw itself is relatively thin. So the idea is, instead of, say, like just, I don't know, chasing down game wardens from Kenya and disemboweling them in the middle of Jurassic Park, they weren't really capable of that. And if they had even tried to do something like that, probably would have broken their toe if the claw had stayed on the toe that long even. So really what they probably did was that claw was not for killing, but it was more so just for pinning down prey that was already dying. Now, were raptors pack hunters as they've become established in the newer movies? God help me, don't get me started on those. Well, no. And you may notice that, yeah, that has feathers, which most likely raptors actually did. So let's get into that right now. Many raptor fossils either show directly, just they have feathers on them, or they have features like quill knobs, basically features on them that are indicative of feathers or something that is a sign of feathers. So while the presence of feathers is emphasis not known in every species, so, don't come at me with the pitchforks here, not known in every species, there's enough of these species that we know for sure have feathers, and because of their interrelationships with other species, like say 1A is an immediate relative of B and C, then then you know that most likely B and C also had feathers as well. Now, this is interesting. So this is a chart of several well-known raptors compared to a human. Now, one, you have Microraptor, which is famous for most likely having 2 sets of wings, which is awesome. Austroraptor is number 3. Utah Raptor is number 5. Our friend from earlier, Deinonychus, is number 6. That's the one in the back. In the lower middle is Dromaeosaurus. And then the cute little wee guy up front there in 2, that's a Velociraptor. Yeah, folks, they really were the size of a turkey. They were not big. They were a lot smaller than what you think. They're kind of like, I've almost compared them to friends like Chucky, where I never really understood why the Child's Play movies could be that scary. I'm just like, just take a trash can, put it upside down, put it on top of the thing, and problem solved. Now, so we're going to go into a couple of the raptors here. Now, this is Austroraptor. They're from South America, specifically Argentina. You're looking at about 16 foot long and 660 pounds plus. The weight estimates on this thing are all over the map. So it's anywhere from like 660 on up to over 1,500 people are saying. And yes, I can't help it. That reconstruction on the left, it's lovely colors, but the same. I look at that and I just see one thing and one thing only. So, oh well. Now, Bambi Raptor. This was indeed named after the Disney character Bambi. It was found by a individual that at the time was 14, and so, you know, just they named it after Bambi. This may or may not be a legit species. One of the concerns with this is that it may actually be a smaller version of another already established species. So that's something that's ongoing now with the research. Here is Dakota Raptor. It's a fairly sized raptor, 14 plus feet long and over 500 pounds. This is what's known as potentially a chimera. So if anybody is familiar with, say, classical literature, so say the ancient Greeks and Romans, a chimera is a creature that had the body and head of a lion with the tail of a snake, and they had like a goat's head on its back. So it's kind of a pig den of different animals. And that, theoretically, is what a chimera is in paleontology. Not literally, mind you, but it's a potential pig den of different fossils and different species, because you have to keep in mind, fossilization is really, it can be a very difficult and complex process. And even after then, there's nothing to say that fossils from a species that died in X location will be found in X location. I mean, I found various teeth, fossils, other things in the famous fossil cricks in New Jersey and Monmouth County. I found species in there that didn't even live in that part of New Jersey. It's just over the subsequent millions of years, things have just washed out and you find them. And that's what a chimera is. The concern with Dakota Raptor is that some of the bones that comprised sort of the type specimen, the one that classified it originally, they were actually from different species, and it was just a mishmash that got accidentally combined together. Here is Deinonychus. Now, you look at that, now imagine that with scaly reptilian skin. Deinonychus was the model in Michael Crichton's mind, and then in the subsequent movies, for Velociraptor in Jurassic Park. So how did this mistake come about? Well, not really a mistake, but really when you think about it, now that we know that the raptor was the size of a turkey and covered in feathers, could you really imagine Samuel L. Jackson running from that? No. So here's what happened. So, like I said, Crichton wanted a character, sort of not really a character, but another dinosaur to sort of bounce off a T-Rex, to be this another threat. He's looking around and he's looking at pictures of Deinonychus and he's thinking like, ooh, that's what I want right there. That's what I need. But he's looking at the name and he's just, okay, now people, not every reader is going to be able to pronounce that correctly in their head. It doesn't really have as much of a literal flow to it. But then he looked at the name Velociraptor and it's just boom. That's the type of name that can sell merchandise and toys and t-shirts, and it has. So yes, Velociraptor was assigned the characteristics of Deinonychus really for sake of merchandising early on. This here is Dromaeosaurus. Now, it was a medium-sized raptor, about 35 pounds. Just looks like a very angry pigeon, yes. But you know what? That's kind of, we know now, really what a lot of them looked like. Now, there's a bit of debate as to how much raptors were capable of flight and how close they could get to it. On one hand, you have Mahakala on the left, which had like the little small stumpy wings like the flightless birds that we have today, like emu and ostrich. But then you have Xiaotingja on the right, and you kind of look at that, and yes, that's not an artistic reconstruction. In all frankness, I picked that photo because it reminds me of the Step in Time dance in Mary Poppins. And when I saw that, I just started laughing maniacally, like picturing that speaking with Dick Van Dyke's accent dancing around London. But yeah, think of that with wings. And a lot of people, researchers now, and that's actually a very older, in terms of time in the chronology, that's a very old raptor. So people are wondering, well, if that had what we know were feathered and potential wings back then, there's a lot of debate going on back and forth now as to where raptors fit in the whole entire interrelationship of dinosaurs and birds. And that's something that's ongoing because you have species like on the left that are kind of sort of like one thing but not really the other but then on the other end you have ones that are more so birds. So it's something up to debate. Here you have Microraptor. That's the one from earlier that has potentially the two sets of wings. They were actually beneath its legs. Utah Raptor right there, over 1,000 pounds. Zheguandong. This one is another one that's very well noted for its feathers. And, of course, our friend Velociraptor. It really did look like a emphasis or not 6 foot turkey, but all the same, pretty awesome. And really, it launched a franchise that's still going today. So, the more you know, folks. Thank you very much now for joining us this time. Hope you can join us for any of our subsequent other films or visit us on Facebook or on the main club website. Thank you very much now.